just shouldn't be this way. This experience has really shown me that our medical system is just so broken. It's just so broken.
One of the things that really sucks, so sucks, because you're so fucking tired every day to read papers and understand stuff and talk to fucking doctors and say, listen, figure this out. I'm too fucking tired to read this shit and explain it to you. Just do something for my kid, can you? Just do something for her.
I think the kids that are being missed, it's a staggering number, staggering.
Antibodies are a part of the immune system that attack foreign invaders and bacteria. Autoantibodies are confused. They attack cells that are healthy. This is called autoimmune disease. PANDAS stands for Pediatric Autoimmune Neuropsychiatric Disorder Associated with Streptococcus, which is a horrible thing to have, and more people should know about it.
In 1986, Dr. Susan Sweeto at the National Institute of Mental Health was studying children presenting with Sydenham's chorea, a post-streptococcal illness. One of the children Sweeto is studying, his mom notices his tics got worse each time he had a strep infection, which they treat with antibiotics. The child's ticking and strange behavior were remarkably reduced. Sweeto suspected this child wasn't alone.
He would literally scream bloody murder like a terror cry. Not just a "I'm not getting my way" cry, terror in his face. So we brought that up to the doctor when we went, and they sent us straight to the psychiatrist.
Unfortunately, the word possessed comes to mind, that this child was doing so beautifully and then complete and overnight different child.
That's a scary feeling, to have someone take your child from you.
How does an 11-year-old child go from the safety of his rural home to being committed to a New Orleans psych unit? He was his normal self. Then suddenly, he wasn't. And it seems no one would listen to this mom.
He was completely dysfunctional. He would urinate on himself. He was completely overwhelmed with rituals.
He couldn't eat, he couldn't drink. He literally was wasting away. And I know he wanted to, because he would tell me, "I'm thirsty, I want a drink," but he couldn't bring himself to do it.
Kim and Steve try to get help, but no one in the local medical community invests the time to diagnose Preston. No blood work, no real medical workup. They're sent out the door with a prescription for 25 milligrams of Zoloft, a psychiatric medication, which has no effect. So Kim gets on the road to a bigger town to see a specialist in child psychiatry, who suggests that Preston's new school is the reason for his bizarre behavior. The psychiatrist increases the Zoloft to 100 milligrams and adds Vistarol, a sedative.
You just keep pushing, you just try to figure out what's wrong. I mean, we would just go to doctor after doctor and try to encourage him that it's okay, we'll figure out what's wrong, to keep his spirits up. But in the meantime, he would tell me something's wrong. My mind is telling me to do these things, and I don't know why.
Nothing is working for Preston. He's not eating, and he's getting worse each day. So they pack up the car and head to a university medical center in New Orleans. And even they don't know what to do with him. A physician's emergency certificate is issued, and Kim and Steve lose custody of Preston. He is taken across town to an adolescent psychiatric unit.
And that's where he cried and begged us not to leave him. Actually, I had to get up and go outside for a while. I couldn't handle it. It was just, break me in tears, and he couldn't let him see me doing that. But it was bad, real bad. You can't imagine how bad it was.
When I first got there, I didn't want to leave my parents. And like, all in bad shape.
I think that pediatricians who had been somewhat neutral read the debate in there and concluded that PANDAS doesn't exist, and if it does, it's so controversial, I'm not going to touch it.
Adding to the controversy, the authors failed to disclose ties to the pharmaceutical industry, and in particular to Cyadon, a manufacturer of a tick medication. When asked to comment on this, Doctors Curlin and Singer both declined invitations to be part of this documentary.
In this particular case, one or more of us did not completely fill out our conflict of interest form, or I'm not sure. The key thing is a potential conflict of interest, I think.
Yes, the disclosure should have been made. It was ultimately made, but actually in the context of that paper, it would have been a much bigger deal if one of us was developing a competitor to IVIG, for example.
As it turns out, Cyadon's patent applications reveal the company is indeed developing alternative treatments for these patients. The patent claims their medication is effective for Tourette syndrome and, ironically, PANDAS.
Well, Big Pharma has all sorts of issues, and, they have a conflict of interest, and they have a vested interest in their product.
I think there are children all over the country who are in psych wards who shouldn't be because they have PANDAS.
It was so terrifying. You're supposed to be the protector of your child, and someone takes that from you. It's just a helpless feeling.
Preston is confined to the adolescent psychiatric unit in New Orleans and is having tremendous separation anxiety. His medical records show that psychiatrists have added Zyprexa, Risperdal, Lexapro, and Ativan.
When that's not working, they'll add another medication. And then if that's not working, they'll change the dose or maybe change the medication. So it can take a long time for people that really stay on the medications before anybody says this is absolutely not working. I think it depends on the tolerance for suffering that either the parents have or the psychiatrist has.
Noting Preston's oppositional defiance, in this case not eating, they place him in darkened solitary, called the quiet room.
Like I couldn't sit down, I couldn't touch anything. And like when I couldn't sit down, they would put me in like this dark room, like a timeout room. And like it was really bad. And I couldn't eat, and they were serving fried catfish that night. And I couldn't eat it, and that was my favorite food.
He was very dehydrated, I could tell. I didn't even recognize him. He had gone down since he'd been in there.
There's no way that was behavioral. No child is going to decide to one day just stop eating and tell you he wants to eat and just can't do it. That's, to me, I knew it wasn't behavioral, but that's where everybody was pointing. That's what everybody was telling us, it was behavioral.
I had figured out what I thought was wrong with him, and so I called the physician and asked her to please run this test on him. I was very excited because they're drawing lab work every day anyway. And she immediately said no, that she thought about PANDAS when he came in, but he did not meet criteria. And that if I thought something was medically wrong with him, I could come and pick him up and have him cleared myself.
This is a political and logistic problem. There are no psych hospitals that are really good at doing medicine, and there's no medical hospitals that can deal with severely psychiatric patients. The two are really incompatible with one another because, psychiatric hospitals really are geared towards, the whole model is based on therapy, talk therapy, and drugs, and not really investigating what's behind things.
So after nearly 2 weeks in an adolescent psychiatric hospital, the doctors release Preston. His discharge orders list him as stable and prognosis good, despite the fact that he hasn't eaten in more than 10 days while under their care.
It's upsetting to me. I was taught in pediatric residence, listen to the mother, listen to the mother.
Someone did finally listen to Kim. Preston's anti-DNase B was significantly elevated, indicating he had a recent strep infection. Not definitive proof, but combined with his OCD and lack of response to behavioral medications, it is another clue for finding treatment.
I started a high dose of Augmentin once a day, and I stopped the Risperdal. The Zoloft had been stopped previously.
But I started noticing little things within a week or so of him on antibiotics. He could touch light switches. He wanted to bathe himself after about 2 weeks. And at 3 weeks, I think he had completely gained 85% of his normal functioning back.